We've seen the awful images, and we have heard the words from the Obama administration. Are they going to be followed with action? Is U.S. intervention even a good idea? I want to talk about this with Harvard University's Stephen Walt. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us today on The Brief. You know, I have known that you've been opposed to direct U.S. military intervention there, but I want you to listen to what John McCain had to say this week.
Everything that the non-interventionists said that would happen in Syria if we intervened has happened. The jihadists are on the ascendancy. There is chemical weapons being used. The massacres continue. The Russians continue to be assisting Bashar Assad, and the Iranians are all in.
Does anything that John McCain say change your point of view?
No, it doesn't, because there are still no attractive U.S. options for military intervention that show a high probability of actually making the situation better. The situation there is clearly awful, but direct American military involvement is unlikely to improve it. There are real limits to what the United States can accomplish with air power, in part because we don't know, say, where all of the chemical weapons might be, and because air power alone doesn't allow you to control political events on the ground. Even Senator McCain is not advocating the use of American ground troops there, and I think, unfortunately, we remain in a situation where the only attractive option for the United States is humanitarian assistance to the refugees, but not direct military involvement to try and win the civil war.
What is the major reason that the U.S. and others are willing to stand on the sidelines in this one? What are their interests that can't be overcome?
Well, first of all, it's not clear that the United States has vital interests in the outcome in Syria. It's obviously a wrenching humanitarian situation, but Syria has been governed by a brutal regime for 40 years, and the United States has been, successful, safe, and prosperous that entire period. So determining which group of people is going to be running Syria in the future may not be a vital interest for the United States. More importantly, we don't have the capacity to dictate the outcome there. We could give arms to rebels, but we don't know which rebel groups are the ones to support, and we don't know which ones are likely to win out in the end. And what we may be doing if we provide more arms to rebel groups is simply fueling an ongoing conflict and guaranteeing that Syria descends into a long civil war such as occurred in Lebanon or such as we've been contending with in Afghanistan. I think all of those reasons explain why the Obama administration and others have been very leery of getting more directly involved in what is essentially an intractable civil conflict.
What is your red line? Do you have one? Should the U.S. have one?
Well, I think what the administration is now doing is appropriate. That is to say, we do have to ask the question of whether chemical weapons might fall into the hands of extremist groups. And so the fact that we're doing contingency planning for that possibility is a good thing. I think we sometimes exaggerate the impact of chemical weapons. They're dangerous, but they're not like nuclear weapons. They're not as lethal. Nonetheless, if we felt that there was some danger that they were going to get into the hands of al-Qaeda sympathetic groups, then we at least want to consider what our military possibilities might be. But we ought to recognize that trying to destroy them from the air is not a particularly attractive option, partly because we don't know where they're all there, but also because military power, even in an age of precision munitions, remains fairly crude, and its effects are unpredictable, could probably lead to civilian casualties, even if we were trying to simply prevent chemical weapons from falling into the hands of the wrong people.
Stephen, before we have to go very quickly, I just want to ask you, when we look at polls, the U.S. public seems to be adamant on this one as well. They don't want to become involved. When you look at the situation in Iraq, the problems that remain there despite the loss of so much blood and treasure, is the U.S. taking a lesson from what happened in Iraq?
Well, I think that's right. The United States had over 100,000 troops in Iraq, and we could not dictate the political outcome there. We did back the al-Maliki government, and we now think of the al-Maliki government as being too extreme and pushing a Shia agenda that we don't think is good for Iraq or good for the region. It just shows you that our capacity to shape politics on the ground in Syria is quite limited. What we can do is provide humanitarian assistance to refugees, inside and outside Syria, and that's what the United States and the rest of the international community should be emphasizing right now.
Stephen Walt, our thanks to you for being with us today on The Brief.
Nice talking with you.